Facebook. Yep, there it is. Called it. I'll have to fix that. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Comics for All. Today is Saturday, February 14th, so happy Valentine's out there to everybody who should celebrate that holiday. This is our rare Ink and Insights segment on Comics for All. So this is Comics for All, where comics, creativity, and community all connect. Our guest today is DJ. DJ has a plethora of comic creations, and we're also here to discuss his new series called Glitch, which we're going to delve into. So DJ, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule and joining the channel today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Always a blast to talk with fellow comic nerds.
Absolutely. And I love, being a comics librarian, I get paid to read comics, which is kind of a unique, really cool position.
It's a dope job. How do I get that?
It's a right place, right time is all I can say. I kind of not necessarily lucked into it, but I really just knowing the right people and just kind of things falling in the right places.
Yeah.
So the question I like to ask everyone when we start off is kind of what hooked you into comics as a reader?
Well, I mean, as any kid born in the 90s, I grew up with a lot of the superhero films that came out in the early 2000s, like Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, the X-Men movies. But it wasn't until I was about 9 years old where I came across like an actual comic in person at like a public library. My mom would take us siblings there, and they had a back room with like a rack of comics. And I would just go back there and read for as long as it took my mom to talk to the librarian, which could be anywhere between 10 minutes to an hour, depending on how talkative she felt that day.
Right.
So I got plenty of reading done at that time, but that's where it really started for me.
Fantastic. And I think we're not that far apart in age. I grew up with a lot of the same stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Another good general question, but an important one. When did you realize that you wanted to, be creative and actually be part of the comics community?
Well, I've always loved drawing. I mean, I was always the kid in the back of class in high school and middle school and elementary school, just drawing in his notebook when he should be taking notes. I mean, I was an okay student, but like I should have taken more notes. But it wasn't until I got into college that I was like, okay, this is what I want to pursue, because the entire time growing up, I was told like, well, art's a nice hobby and all, but it's not going to make you any money. You should find a different career, be a doctor, make some money that way. And that just didn't work out, obviously. But as I got into college, I was like, you know what? Art is my calling. I feel like I need to do something with this. And I, of course, at that point had developed more and more of a love and connection with comics. And so I was like, you know what? I want to do this. I want to, learn and study and figure out what makes comic art click for people, what makes it work, what makes it unique, and figure out how to make some for myself. And so I started, in fact, one of my final projects in college was make a comic book, which I look back at it now. My work has vastly improved since then. And I'm kind of embarrassed to talk about that first project, but no, that's kind of where it really came together, was just college realizing, no, this is in fact what I want to do. Because when I first went to college, I was going to be a political science major. Quickly realized that was not going to pan out. Then I switched to business major. Same thing. I was like, yeah, no, this is not working. And then I stepped foot into an art class because I was at a liberal arts school where you had to take an art class at some point.
Right.
And it was like that feeling of coming home. It's like, okay, I need to be here. I need to be doing this, and just kind of snowball from there.
Love that. And then I have another kind of reader-centric question. What's something you've read fairly recently? Didn't have to come out recently necessarily, but something you've read recently, indie or major, that's really stuck with you?
Well, the one that's been sticking with me for a while is a book from Image Comics called Haunt. It came out back in like 2011, I think.
Okay.
And it's Todd McFarlane, Robert Kirkman, Greg Capullo, and Ryan Otley was the creative
what a
team.
lineup.
Right? I mean, as soon as I saw that, I only started reading it like a couple years ago because I was going to my comic shop like every week, and I finally got the like deluxe edition of it. But it's one that I've both read recently and reread all the time, just because there's a brother dynamic in that story that I really connect with, because I have two brothers, and also just Capullo on the art, right? I mean, that he's my guy. Him and Ryan Otley. I mean, you can't get much better than that in the comic community, in my opinion. But no, that one, and also just the fact that it has very strong Spawn vibes, because of course Todd McFarlane is involved. It's going to have that. But that's one I always go back to. And I guess an honorable mention along with that would be Battle Beast. I've absolutely loved that series, and I've been loving delving more and more into the Invincible universe over the past couple of years. So I'd say those two.
Excellent. As someone who reads a lot of comics, I have yet to dive into Invincible. It's on my agenda, but I will get to it at some point.
I have the first 2 Invincible compendiums. I still need to get the 3rd one, because collecting single issues of Invincible at this point is kind of a tall task. They're quite pricey. But
and behind me is all my omnibus and collected editions. So I prefer those, like you said, too. So for folks out there, viewers who haven't met you before, how do you describe yourself as a creator, and kind of what do you do in the comics world?
So how do I describe myself? I'd say, well, I'm a penciler and inker. I mean, primarily penciler. That's where I have honed a lot of my skills. Obviously very much an independent creator. I did a variant cover for Ninja Turtles last year. It was an exclusive variant for a shop called 98 Comics. It was my first ever published work. So I would consider myself a comic artist who's still, making his way in the industry, trying to find my place. And a big part of that has just been trying to make my own things happen, because you have a lot of people out there trying to make it in comics and trying to be, the next, Jim Lee, or name any other kind of comic creator.
Yeah.
And so it's very much a saturated market. So it gets really difficult to be noticed, because there's a lot of really great artists out there.
Yeah, there are.
And so having someone pick you as an artist is, like a needle in a haystack situation. You're better off just trying to make your own thing and making it work. And that's kind of what I've been doing, while at the same time still, just doing a lot of commission work. But I would consider myself mostly self-taught. I guess isn't the right term, because I study a lot of what other comic artists do. And like David Finch, for instance, has a lot of great tutorials online that I've been studying, a lot of great anatomy and other drawing books from someone called Bern Hogarth, does a lot of great books. So yeah, self-taught in a way, more so just like extensive studying. But of course, with college, there were some things that have carried over into my comic work. But anyway, sort of self-taught, independent artist who is just trying to find his way in the comic world.
Love that. So before we actually, dive into talking about Glitch quite a bit here, how are you feeling about the campaign that's going right now? Are you excited, nervous, exhausted already? How are things going?
All three. I mean, creative people, we tend to be very much, focused again on the creative part of the process. And so when it comes to the business side of things, that's where my brain starts to really be like, oh, this stuff, I don't want to do this. I've made the thing. People should just, have it already. And so having to access that business side of my brain has been kind of difficult. But so far raised over $1,000 in the campaign, which is fantastic. 30% of the way there. And it's just been really great to see both the support and also to see, the work that goes into getting these campaigns funded, because
there's
a lot of networking. Yeah. A lot of behind the scenes, a lot of networking, a lot of technical things you have to figure out. And it's one of those things where this is my first campaign that I've launched on Kickstarter. And so a lot of lessons learned for sure. And what's also been great is just asking a lot of the creators for tips and advice, like how do you get it to work? How do you get your campaign going and all that good stuff? And so I always appreciate the feedback and the advice I get from those people that I've reached out to, because they don't have to do that. They don't have to take the time out of their day to advise some, low content creator, but they do, and it's much appreciated.
That's right. And I put the Kickstarter link in the chat for anyone who's out there. I can see there's at least 2 people out there, so feel free to check it out. And it'll also be in the description of the video when we post it later to YouTube. So there's no excuse for you not to check out the page. So DJ, for someone who really hasn't heard of Glitch or has only really seen this brief artwork here on the page, what's the pitch for it?
It's a near future sci-fi. It's going to be the first of 3 issues of a miniseries. And it's about an android who is trying to understand what it means to be human and learning a lot of the wrong lessons along the way. And that's the cover A, which is done by myself and colored by Dan Kemp. who I mentioned Spawn before. He was very involved in that in the 90s and 2000s. But if people out there really like stories like Ex Machina, iRobot, The Bicentennial Man, they will like this story because it hits a lot of those beloved beats of those types of stories. And also delves into sort of the dangers of artificial intelligence, but not in like an overhanded way. Obviously, I'm not saying like, AI art is bad in this book. I'm not going to that extent, but there is some subtle things in them that talk about the natural dangers of it, right? And I is a character that I've had for a long time, and finally doing something with it in a story that I feel like is thought-provoking and in a way that also just kind of gets your mind going.
That's right. That's actually a really good way to put it. And I personally am a sucker for sci-fi comics. So when I first saw this, I was like, oh, I'm immediately in.
Awesome.
So the origin of Glitch itself, kind of what was the first spark or the concept in your head, and a character, an image, kind of how did the concept come to you first?
Well, it actually came to me about 17 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
Long time ago. My little brother and I, when he was 5 and I was 12, we would read through, those Marvel encyclopedia books all the time. So you probably have one. Yeah, I'm sure.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, like one of those. Yeah, where it just like goes through the bios and the different story beats of different characters and stuff. We read ours so many times that the spine was like falling off. And one day we were just like, you know what? Let's just make our own encyclopedia of characters. Let's make our own heroes, anti-heroes, villains, and all that stuff. And an android called Glitch was one of the villains that we created. And of course, back when I was not even a teenager and he was 5, the character was very different then than it is now. But the basic concept was there, where he was an android who was, very much disillusioned by humanity. And in that version, he was more like a villain of the week type of thing, where he'd be robbing banks or trying to steal weaponry in order to fund his campaign against humanity. A lot of campy, like golden age, silver age type of stuff.
Right.
But over the years, he's a character that I kept returning to, kept drawing. And then finally about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, I was working on an assembly line in a manufacturing plant. And I was just one of those days where I could just turn off my brain. Muscle memory is doing everything. And suddenly, throughout that day, I basically got the outline for a 3-issue miniseries just poured into my brain from nowhere, which never happens to me because I'm not a writer. I'll be the first to tell you that. My 2 brothers are much more writers than I ever will be. And so the fact that this just kind of materialized in my head, I knew I had to do something with this, and of course I talked with them and got their input and everything. But yeah, a character 17 years in the making and changed again a decent amount along the way, but finally to the point where I am really happy with the story that he's involved in, and in a story that's less stereotypical and again more thought-provoking is what I always wanted him to be, and what I want all my stories to be. I want people to think about the things that I'm giving people, and make it just more interesting to where it has reread value, right? That's one thing I value more than anything in entertainment is rewatch and reread value. Can I go back to it and find something new every time, or kind of approach it with a different mentality and still find it interesting?
That's a great way to put it. The next question is kind of who is the main protagonist and what's the core conflict of the series?
So the main character we follow from his perspective is the android. His name is Ty. He's a TY unit is what he's called, which is just short for a thank you unit. Basically, he's an assistant living android, like an android butler.
Okay.
And he is part of a company's efforts to get these androids to the lower class population, because the CEO of the company that makes them, Rivon Tech, has this idea like, well, we have a lot of these rich people owning these things, but we haven't broken into the lower class market yet. And the problem is, of course, they're super expensive to manufacture. But he's like, you know what? People take out loans to buy homes. People take out loans to go to college. We need to make these androids that same type of necessity where even if you can't afford it, people take out loans to buy one so we can make more money.
Yeah. Okay.
And so Ty is the android given away in that lottery that they have this idea for, to kind of get an android into the lower class community and show people, hey, you need this product. And the thing that starts the entire story is that this specific android, due to some negligence in his manufacturing was produced without an artificial intelligence inhibitor chip, which allows him to develop his own sense of individuality, his own concept of what is morally correct, what his place in the world is, you know, if humans are important or not. He's allowed to come to his own conclusions, which of course wasn't the intention, but everything in the story kind of devolves from that idea.
Love that. And this is a really good question too. If you can speak on any particular movies, games, or comics that you can not stole, obviously, but influenced the tone and the visuals of the story.
Yeah, I mentioned before things like Ex Machina, The Bicentennial Man, iRobot, because those are types of movies that I really loved growing up, especially iRobot. I think I got iRobot on DVD for like my 8th birthday or something, and I always loved that movie. And so my intention with the tone of this book is that you get the sense that there's something wrong, but it's not overbearing. Like it's normal world scenarios, like it's the normal type of people, but there's something underlying just waiting to go wrong, right? That's the kind of vibe that I'm going for with this book.
Excellent. That's definitely a suspenseful sci-fi in a sense.
Yes, absolutely. That's a perfect way to put it.
So if you can, who are the creative members of the team that have been working with you on this, and what did they bring to the project?
Yeah, so I mentioned that my little brother and I created the character, and so my little brother Biggs is listed as a co-creator, and he also wrote the majority of the script for issue 2, which, of course, after we get this funded, we'll move on to that one eventually. I'm working on the art for that one, and attached to color, I mentioned Dan Kemp, who, again, for those out there who don't know, he colored Spawn, Amazing Spider-Man, Wolverine. He's colored for Marvel, DC, Image, and a bunch of other just random independent stuff. Like, he'll tell you that he's done everything, and he's not wrong. He's very much done everything. And I got Nikki Powers as the letterer. She's done a lot of like independent Kickstarter stuff. She was recommended to me from a friend who also does Kickstarter books, and she did a fantastic job too. And then, of course, I got a lot of people who helped with editing of the script, giving me good feedback on it. Like my wife was very much involved in that. My older brother, Asher Storm, he's a novelist who helped me with some writing tips. Matt Slay, who did a lot of work on Ninja Turtle comics in the early 2000s. He gave me some good advice on page composition, storytelling. But again, the main team is me, my brother Biggs, Dan Kemp, and Nikki Powers.
Excellent. Sounds like a great team to me.
Oh yeah, they've all been great.
So now we finally get to delve into the Kickstarter a little bit. So obviously the first question, why Kickstarter? Instead of either going to through a publisher or direct sales from like your website or something?
Yeah, so I had reached out to a couple different publishers, and I'd made a submission for the book, and hadn't really heard anything back because, again, they get so many submissions all the time, and you're just basically screaming to the void at that point. And knowing my personal luck, I wasn't going to find a way to get into it. But one of the main reasons is that Dan Kemp being involved, I got to make sure that I pay him for his work, right? And he's very high demand, very great colorist. And he, as much as he's working with me, he's still got to get paid, right?
Right.
It's only reasonable. And I'm not someone who can just fork over the amount of money that I would need to get it colored. And so the Kickstarter, main part of it is raising enough money to make sure he's paid and that the book looks as good as it possibly can be. Because like I could color it and it would look fine, but that's not what I'm trained in, right? I'm trained in pencils and inking, and finding someone who can amplify the book even further with colors, is going to go a lot further than just me, like just doing it for the sake of getting it done. Right.
Yeah.
And so Kickstarter was the main thing that was recommended to me. Dan Kemp himself told me, like, do Kickstarter. Like, you can submit as many times as you want. Most of the time, they're not even going to see it. Most of the time, they're not even going to really even open the email that you submit it. And so Kickstarter is the way to go. And he's been involved in several different Kickstarters at this point. And so he kind of knows his way around. And it was very helpful to me to kind of have that, that person with that type of knowledge involved.
Absolutely. I'm sure that advice and feedback is, critical, and just something that's not even, you can't even put a price on it.
Oh yeah. I mean, each time I message them, like we message like once a week, if not more. And a lot of times he'll kind of go on like a spiel about how the comic industry works, or he'll talk about some projects he did. And it'll basically be like I'm sitting looking at the text of like a comics art lecture. And it's pretty awesome, you know? It's like, this is a guy whose comics I read a lot growing up. I've seen his colors my entire life. And now he's just giving me all sorts of advice and talking about different creators he's worked with and different things that worked and didn't work. It's like, okay, this is pretty awesome. I love this.
No kidding. Do you actually want me to play the video on the Kickstarter page? Because it will play through here.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Let's give it a whirl.
Obviously the story follows a android. In the book, he's called Ty. He's like a thank you unit because he's basically a live-in assistant android. Is TY3457, but the family that he lives with calls him Ty, just for short. And basically the whole idea is that if you were dropped onto an alien world, for instance, with its own morality, with its own laws, with its own customs, how would you adjust? Would you pick up on their social cues? Would you pick up on their moral code? Or would you kind of misconstrue things and misunderstand them a little bit and kind of do your own thing? And that's kind of the idea behind this, where this tech company basically has this promotional idea to try to get more of the masses to buy their androids and their products. And this family, this low to middle income family, wins an android, a living android, to help them out. He is brought to this family, but at one point, because of a simple decision from a worker at the factory, he does not get an artificial intelligence inhibitor chip that restricts his ability to develop his own individuality. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of goes to the theme of choices that I was talking about. And as the story goes on, he basically develops his own idea of what his purpose is, who he is, who the people around him are to him. And that's kind of where his journey spurns on from there. It's almost like, if anyone out there's watched The Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams, imagine this is sort of a darker, more psychological twist on that idea.
Right. That turned out fantastic.
Yeah, shout out to World at War Comics. That was a really great interview that I had with him. And he's actually the person that I think that told me about you. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I'll have to reach out to him. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what did you learn from watching other campaigns that you tried to apply to this one? Like pre-launch stuff, signups, speaking to other podcasts, and just kind of that kind of material.
Yeah. I tried to give it enough room before the launch, and I was posting about it. I mean, I've been posting about this book for the past 2 years, honestly, where it's slow starting, getting it going, and then getting Dan Kemp on board really is what sort of gave it a snowball effect where it's like, okay, it's up and going now. I think a lot of the great advice I've gotten has been after the launch, which is both great and can be frustrating at the same time, but it's great advice. But what I would go back and do now is, like, right now I'm in the midst of just a lot of promotion, posting about it all the time, pages and different things about the tiers and stuff. I would go back and kind of start having that energy more before the Kickstarter launches. And so a lot of lessons learned from this one, of course. I think we're still have a decent possibility of getting it funded because I'm, again, talking to people more and more about it every day.
Yep.
But again, a lot of great advice of how to do even better the next time around. When I say, do the Kickstarter for issue number 2, for instance, I'll know how to make that even more successful than the next one and the next one. And a lot of things you both have to learn and just kind of experience for yourself, I guess. Because for me, I try to take advice and apply it, but I find more often than not, I learn from experience.
Yes.
Even if that means I have to fail, which,
I'm the same way.
Yeah, which can be frustrating. But again, when you try something and it doesn't quite work out how you want it to, again, there's things you learn from that and you improve in whatever that field is as a result.
Absolutely. So now a fun part always for the viewers out there. Can you walk us through some of the reward tiers you're most excited about? Any cool variants, prints, commissions, limited items, anything of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to the rewards tab here, you can click on that.
Dun, dun, dun.
All right. And then, so you have the lowest one is the $3 digital copy. You just get a PDF of the book. And of course, you have a physical copy of Cover A done by myself and Dan Kemp, which a lot of people have really been ecstatic about this cover. I mean, it's a very simple but very striking cover, in my opinion. I mean, don't want to boast too much of myself, but
Right.
I like how it turned out. And then, of course, we have a physical copy for cover B.
Yep,
which,
there we go.
Yeah, which I got another colorist friend named Alonzo Espinoza to do the colors for that one. And I love that one too. I mean, that one turned out fantastic. And it, as you read the book, you kind of see, what this cover is like hinting at and showing. And it's just one of those like sort of still life covers that are very satisfying when done well.
Oh, yeah.
Which I would like to think that it was done well. But again, don't want to boast too much. And then, of course, going down, you have physical copies of covers A and B. You get both versions, the main cover and the main variant.
Absolutely. That's a great price for the two of them.
Oh, yeah. I try to keep pretty reasonable for people while also making it, worth it for the campaign. So that way it benefits everybody.
Yes.
And then I know there's a lot of people that like black and white covers. And so that was the next cover set where it's just the inks for both the covers. I think that's just a cool, vibe to them, for lack of a better term.
It really is.
Yeah. And then you have the complete set, which includes cover A and cover B and a sketch variant, which I thought was a cool inclusion because I do a lot of like a big part of my income is doing a blank variant sketch commissions. And, I sell those through commission work as well as on my eBay store. And so I figured, for those who've been following for a while, this might be a really cool option for people who want a custom piece of art as well as both covers of the book.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen that as an option very often. Maybe even like only the second time I've seen that. So I really like that option.
Yeah, I mean, sketch covers, are just awesome. Plus, with the logo that Dan and I were able to make, I mean, I feel like it just looks really great on a blank variant. That's just me.
Yeah.
But then you have the custom sketch cover by itself. So the previous one, you have a sketch variant where it's just blank. But then this version, you have actual custom art on it.
Got it.
And you can kind of request like anything specific that you'd want on it. Or if you just want a simple bust of the android, which I think most people probably end up wanting who back that. And then you get to of course, the higher priced options, which, we have one backer on that, which is really great. Ultimate Collector, which you get both cover A, cover B, and the black and white ones, which are called cover C and D, and the blank variant with custom artwork on it, which I think is pretty reasonable for $200.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you have God Mode Collector. This is a more recent addition to the Kickstarter because I approached this book sort of in an interesting way. I started off doing the pages with traditional pencils first because I like to keep things, kind of mixed. I do both digital and traditional. That way I don't lose skill in either or. And so I got 8 pages in after the, the cover. So 9 total pieces of original art. But I wanted to kind of rev up the speed of production. And so after that, I started doing digital pencils, which, still worked great.
Yeah.
And so, but with the 8, or I guess the 9 pages of original art, I was like, you know what? Let's do a tier where you have 9 slots to get, all the covers, sketch variant, and a piece of original pencils for the book, which I love that as an option. But again, I'm biased. So I loved making that tier. In fact, I think I made that tier 2 days before the Kickstarter launched because you know what?
There you go.
People want the original art if they're invested in this. So there we go.
You're right, because there's a lot of collectors out there that are really into original art, which I love too.
Yeah.
So and you touched on this a little bit, but behind the scenes, can you share something, either good or negative that you've kind of learned already?
Yeah, so you kind of have this image here of character design, right? The character sheet for the android. One little behind the scenes thing was when I first started work on this comic a couple of years ago when I was, getting things going, I had a much more robotic design in mind for him. I had, just eyes, a simple faceplate, no mouth, no nose. I was kind of going for more of a cold expression type of thing. And we still kind of have that vibe in the book. But after a while, I was like, you know what? It's finicky to draw and it's finicky to look at. And so I was like, you know what? Let's make him look a little bit more human-like, more anatomical so that, because comic artists, we practice studying anatomy all the freaking time. That's the main thing we do.
Right.
And so I was like, you know what? Let's make it to where it sort of approaches that uncanny valley without breaking into it, and make it to where, you know, it's more human-like. And I love that panel so much. Dan's colors just really make it pop. Absolutely love that.
Oh yeah. And you spoke of Uncanny Valley, which I don't know if you've read that title by Tony Fleece. It's pretty awesome.
I think I've heard of it. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I need to.
It's really good just take on a kind of the multiversal idea, but there's actually I don't remember who the artist is, but it's really cool in that there's like 3 or 4 different art styles on the same page because it's like cartoons coming from different universes together.
Oh, okay.
It's really unique. I don't think I've seen anything quite like that.
So almost kind of like what Spider-Verse was doing with the movies a little bit, although they kind of blended things a little bit more. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
So now we get to delve into your art and writing process a little bit. So you're both a writer and artist on Glitch, obviously. Which role usually leads? Do you start with scripts, thumbnails, or visuals in your head?
Well, for me, when I first had it like pour into my brain, for lack of a better term, I saw the visuals of it first because I'm a very visual person, obviously, as an artist.
Yeah.
But putting it on paper was probably the hardest part for me because I knew how things wanted to look. I knew how certain panels wanted to look. But finding the right words was a bit hard because, again, I'm not a trained writer. That's not something that I've ever really aspired to do. Well, that's not necessarily true, but later in life, you know, that's not something I was aspiring to be.
Fair.
But so yeah, visuals first. And then I sort of wrote out the story like, you know, how I'd write out a novel in like chapters and like not necessarily breaking it down into dialogue and descriptions and things like that, which kind of added more work for me because then I had to go back through, break it down panel by panel, page by page, issue by issue, which, you know, it worked out fine, but it added more work to me than I needed to add to myself.
Yeah.
As busy as I try to keep myself anyway, it just added more. But then after that, I did very rough pencil outlines for the pages. Like I have a sketchbook. In fact, I could probably show you an example of outlines.
Sure.
Here. So fun little sneak peek. I got outlines in this sketchbook of issue number 2. But you kind of get to see the fun, rough thumbnails for these pages. I want to make sure that I find the pages here because I try to mark them like important things in the sketchbook. But there's so many things in here. I need to get a new sketchbook soon because I do try to do like 3 or 4 pages of sketching a day.
There you go.
Just to make sure that I'm, you know, warming up and making sure that I'm, you know, keeping up my abilities. That's one of the biggest points of anxiety for comic artists is that,
oh yeah,
am I still, you know, do I still have the skills that I have attained thus far? Like, am I still a good enough artist? And it's a nice affirmation type of thing.
Absolutely.
So actually, these are the last 2 pages of the first issue, actually. So they got these very rough outlines here for what the pages to look like, where the character's going to be, how the panels are going to look.
Nice.
And so I start with that. And then when I do things with digital pencils, I, you know, take a picture of the rough sketch, and then I upload it to my program. I use Procreate on iPad just because it's super cheap and you can get a bunch of really cool brushes on there. Like the fact that more artists don't use Procreate is beyond me. Just because they're like, oh, I use like Adobe, you know, Photoshop or whatever Adobe thing. And it's like, Adobe is like super expensive. We don't need to be paying that much money.
Yeah.
But then again, I'm biased against that. So that's just me.
I've had the people I've interviewed, I think a decent number are using Procreate, at least in the indie scene, because I've interviewed a lot of indie creators. So
good.
And you touched on my next question a little bit is, you know, kind of walking through, you know, page to process from blank page to finish, script, layouts, pencils, inks, colors, and letters. Where do you find the most time-consuming part of this process has been? What's the most time-consuming?
I would say inking for me, because again, like I mentioned, like I'm a penciler and inker, but I'm more so a penciler. And so with inking, I find myself getting really OCD when I'm inking. Because, you know, a lot of comic artists that I like Daniel Warren Johnson, for instance. He can be as messy as he wants, and it looks amazing. And I love it, but it also pisses me off because when I try to do it, I hate how it looks. You know what I mean? There's a sort of refined messiness to it that I haven't quite been able to nail down. And so my art style tends to come off a lot more clean because of, again, that OCD and really liking how artists like Capullo, for instance, and Jonathan Glapian with Capullo's pencils, how that looks. And so that definitely inspires me a lot. But yeah, inking makes sure that things look right. The rendering is as it should be, the cross hatching, and other different textures with inking and exploring what things work better for background stuff.
Yeah.
And so, whereas pencils, I'm just, drawing shapes and characters, and I'm able to play around with it. And it's okay to be messy because it's pencils and it's understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you get to inking, like for instance, with this first issue, I did all the pages, all the pencil pages first, everything, all 34 pages of the first issue in pencils. And then I started back over with the inks. And by that point, I had looked at these pages for hours, and I was finally doing the inking. And so if I were to, for this next issue, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like 4 pages of pencils, ink those, another 4 pages of pencils, ink those. That way I'm not looking at the same things over and over and over again and driving myself insane in the process. But yeah, again, to long story short, answer your question, inking definitely took up the most time for me, for sure.
Got it. And that's actually a question I haven't got to ask very often. So I may have that as a staple question going forward.
Yeah.
And you touched on this again too. What tools are kind of your go-tos in 2026 between the analog and the digital?
Yeah. So Procreate's my main one. I got a lot. Well, it's cool. I got a lot of different brushes from one of my college professors who taught me how to use Procreate.
Nice.
And so I just have so many tools, my arsenal from that, which is super nice. And none of them I had to pay for outside of, the course, the class fee, which, is what it is. But no, I use a lot of that, and traditional pencils, of course. I have this really nice like pencil art set that I got from TikTok, not for free, just because TikTok does that sometimes. And it's super nice. But like, I'll just be sitting in this chair back here, drawing with pencils, the pages or the rough outlines. And then, I'll go to my desk over here if I'm doing traditional pencils for the pages, or I'll just stay there, work on Procreate. And it's kind of got to the point where I have to like force myself to move around multiple times during the day, because I end up sitting for a long period of time. Because again, I get zoned in on what I'm doing. I get so hyper focused that before I know it, like 5 hours have passed and I'm working on a couple different pages. My wife kind of has to let me know that I'm a bit of a workaholic sometimes. But yeah, so digital, Procreate, and all those brushes, traditional pencils. I've entertained the idea of doing traditional inking for one of the issues, but for coherence, I probably won't this time around, but maybe for a future story that I'll want to do.
So, or you could maybe try that as like a backup story, like a short 2 or 3 page something in the back.
Absolutely. Yeah, like you see in the back of like Detective Comics or Action Comics or something like that. Absolutely.
So we're in the closing section now, but the series is obviously not out yet. So have you got any feedback from people who have read it so far, and kind of what's their reactions been, the early readers?
Yeah. I mentioned Matt Slay before, talking with him about it. And, I gave him the script and he was reading through it. And, not to boast, he's like, I like this idea a lot. I think you're doing a really good job with this. It's good pacing. I think a lot of people will like how deliberate the story is, and also how down to earth the family in the story is, because in a lot of, sci-fi android movies, the reason that the androids turn on humanity is either because humans panic about them or the humans are just jerks to the androids.
Yes.
And so you almost end up being on the android side because of that. But in this story, I don't necessarily take that approach. Like, yeah, the family has its own problems, like every other family does. I feel like people can relate to this family in the book more so than maybe other stories about this, type of story.
Right.
But, you kind of relate to them. And so, but you also see where the android's coming from. You can see the sort of twisting of what he's interpreting around him. And I think people will find that a little refreshing. Because again, I feel like sometimes you kind of have to paint one side as evil and one side as good, when really the truth of the matter is that most of the time the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Not everybody's fully good, not everybody's fully bad.
Yep.
And that's exactly what I wanted to input into this story. Like, the people in the book, they have their problems, but they also have great, positives about them, like everybody does. So I wanted to make it more of a human story than more of a traditional, this person's bad, so therefore this person retaliates, or this person, that type of thing.
That totally makes sense. So Are there going to be any appearances for yourself at like in-person conventions or even just attending conventions as a fan?
Oh yeah, I mean, I probably do around 12 to 14 conventions a year.
Okay.
I just did one in Virginia last week where I launched the book because it was a convention that I've been doing for 5 years now.
Excellent.
We used to live out that way, and so it's kind of like a hometown convention for us. And so I have a lot of like built-in clientele and friends and everything. The next show I'm doing is a very small show here in Lawrence, Kansas, which I think maybe a couple hundred people go to, but it's, you know, it's a hometown one. It's pretty great. I will be doing
small town ones though. You get a lot of engagement and kind of a lot of good one-on-one with customers.
Absolutely, especially when they end up being your neighbors.
Yeah,
which is pretty great. But a funny story about that, actually, real quick, a little fun side bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
When we moved out here, my responsibility in the move was to find us a place to live. And so I reached out to different people who were renting out things. And my whole anxiety about it was that I had built a whole network of conventions and stuff out on the East Coast where we lived. I was like, crap, I got to reestablish that and find out where to, you know, find the good conventions that I need to go to. And then as I, you know, found our current renters, I was talking with them and we got to talking and I figured out that the husband, you know, he's a teacher, but on the side, he sells comics at conventions. And so I was like, holy crap. Okay, that worked out pretty nicely.
You're kidding.
But the next big show I'm doing, which will be after the campaign is over, is actually going to be Heroes Con in North Carolina.
Yes.
Which is a fantastic show. I did it for the first time last year, and I'm going back this year. And by that point, we'll actually move back closer to the East Coast. So it'll be a little easier to get to those shows. But yeah, Heroes Con is going to be great. Hopefully at that point, you know, we'll be funded and it'll be in June. So we'll be pretty close, if not done with the book altogether once Dan gets the colors done, which I'm so excited for people to see those pages. It's going to be great.
Nice. You're the third person actually that's mentioned they're going to be at Heroes Con recently. You, Jeremy Whitley, who I interviewed yesterday, and then Dave Franchini is also going to be there. So you guys may have to connect with each other.
It's a great one for sure. I mean, it doesn't get much
better. A lot of good things about it. I really have.
You have to go. You have to go. When I went last year, one of my buddies got me. Did you ever see the foil version of Absolute Batman #1 with the big bat logo on the front?
Yep.
So a friend of mine went and got it signed by Nick Dragotta. And
sweet.
Dragotta at big letters in the bat signal or bat symbol. And so I have that from that convention. And I ran into Mark Waid there. I ran into him multiple times. But of course, David Finch was there. John Romita Jr. was there.
Very nice.
One of my favorites. But yeah, you get a bunch of stuff there. It's a really great, really art-heavy convention, which of course bodes well for me.
Yep. And those are my favorites. I mean, I've been doing a handful of conventions too, and the art-heavy ones are definitely the best.
Oh, yeah.
So what you can share, what can you talk about that you have coming out the rest of this year, or at least what you're working on the rest of this year?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much just Glitch, you know, because what I really want to do is I've already started work on the second issue, because one thing that I've noticed in my own personal experience when I've backed a campaign, where if it takes a long time to get produced, especially if it has like follow-up issues, it can get really frustrating waiting for that, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And even waiting on like big publishers too. Like I remember the whole fiasco with Doomsday Clock with DC, how people had to wait a long time for subsequent issues. And that's one thing I want to avoid. And so I've already started work on the pages for that, so that once this gets funded and finished with the colors, I'll pretty much be close to, if not fully finished with my work on the second issue. And so that, of course, alongside commission work, whether it be sketch variants or just, 11 by 17 pieces that people want. So a good combination of commission work and just working on Glitch. Although my brother and I, the brother who helped me co-create the character, we've been brainstorming a lot of different characters and ideas that we can form into comics. Because again, he's a writer. He's actually going to school for writing at the moment, and so we're hoping to move closer to him this year. So we're hoping to meet together often, just put together ideas, and maybe at the end of this year we could have like maybe 2 or 3 different comic concepts put together to where we can start work on that next year.
Love that. That's fantastic news. So DJ, where can people find you online and follow along what you're working on?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, DJW32Art. I'm also on TikTok, DJWArt. I have a Facebook page as well. I have, excuse me. You can also find me on ArtStation.
Yep, you're on
DJ
Threads as
Wiedrich.
well.
On Threads, yes, Threads and Blue Sky. Apparently, I had forgotten that I had made a Blue Sky account, and you're like, "Oh, I found you." It's like, "Oh, crap! Okay, that exists." Yeah, I'm on all those. You can find me on all those everywhere, and of course, you can find my work, Glitch, on Kickstarter. Glitch issue number 1.
So my last question to close this out is a fun one but odd one, and you kind of semi-answered it. Maybe you have some more information, but favorite snack or meal when you just sit down for a few hours and work on some things.
Well, it's funny you should ask because I have one of them with me right now.
Dr. Pepper.
I'm very much a Dr. Pepper guy. I'm trying to cut back a little bit. I'm trying to do more of the zero sugar stuff.
Yep.
But if I had like a long day, like, you know, a lot of people after a long day, they want to like sit down with a beer.
Yep.
This is what that is for me. I want to sit down with a nice Dr. Pepper, you know, just kind of, you know, do that. And when I'm working on books and stuff, I really try not to be snackish, but you know, my wife's a great cook, and so honestly, whatever she's making,
there you go.
I can't really complain with that. Yeah, Dr. Pepper, whatever the wife's making, honestly.
Great answer.
Yeah, she's in the other room, DJ. So I have to be smart.
Oh, of course, exactly. Got to keep the spouse happy. So
exactly.
All right. Well, DJ, it's been a fantastic conversation. I'm really happy we were able to talk about Glitch a little bit. And everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us. I know there's been a couple people that have joined us throughout the 46 minutes we're going through here. Again, is there any last closing thoughts you'd like to share before we head out?
Well, we're at 30% funded for Glitch, and we have another 21 days in the campaign. So if you want to jump on it now. A lot of great reward tiers. And Jameson, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. This has been Comics for All again. So again, thank you. Happy Valentine's, everybody out there. And it's been Comics for All, where comics, creativity, and community connect. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
See ya.
All right. That was